Chairman, I'm making out 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, councillors, officers, visiting councillors, members of the public, and the thousands watching us around the world online. A few short announcements before we start. Firstly, action in the event of an emergency. In fact, I don't need this on. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, but if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will also be available to listen to afterwards. I want to confirm that all of us present in the room are adhering to the relevant government guidance on COVID-19. I can assure those watching that the meeting room is set up to meet social distancing requirements. Whilst we're not wearing masks while seated, these will be worn if and when we leave our seats. A COVID risk assessment has been undertaken for this meeting. The use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras by visitors, is welcomed, but you are requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent and not to use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. I will just briefly introduce the work of the Cabinet. For the benefit of the members of the public, I would like to explain that the Cabinet is the main executive body of the Council. It is responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all Council services and also makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet is made up of 6 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. My name is Councillor Paul Dundas and I'm the leader of the Council. I shall now go around the table and invite councillors and officers to introduce themselves, starting round in this direction.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Lissymore, Cabinet Member for Resources and Deputy Leader of Colchester Borough Council.
Councillor Darius Laws, Portfolio Holder for Economy, Business and Heritage.
Councillor Simon Crowe, Portfolio Holder for Environment and Sustainability.
Councillor Andrew Ellis, Portfolio Holder for Housing and Planning.
Good evening, Councillor Beverley Oxford, Portfolio Holder for Communities.
Adrian Pritchard, Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Council.
Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Richard Clifford, Lead Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. We'll proceed with the agenda, and the first item is item 2, urgent items. Do we have any urgent items?
There are no urgent items, Chairman.
Thank you. Then we'll proceed with item 3, which is declarations of interest. Cabinet members, do you have any interest to declare? No, I see nobody indicating. Item 4 is minutes of the last meeting on the 7th of July 2021. Cabinet members, do we have any comments on matters arising from them? Can we take them as agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And item 5 is have your say. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 speakers, 7 visiting councillors and 1 member of the public. I'll invite a member of the public first, which is Sir Bob Russell. Sir Bob, I don't think I need to tell you the format, so you're very welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Cabinet. This is a legacy issue which I hope the new administration can put right. I'm referring to the Colchester Museums Development Foundation, which I read about the first time a week or 2 back, an organisation I'd never heard of before. I made inquiries and I discovered it's a newly registered charity with the Charity Commission and also registered at Companies House. Now, I'm a member of the Friends of the Colchester Museums. However, I must stress that I'm speaking in a personal capacity. That said, one of the officers of the Friends of the Colchester Museums told me, I do not mind the idea of setting up the CMDF itself, but I'm not happy with the way it has been done. We should have been kept in the picture and should be aware of any changes to our role. As far as I can see, the other heritage societies are in the dark too, not a good way to set it up. And he went on, it has been noted recently that the only time we hear from the museum is when they want money that we have been willing to give. With the museum running other schemes, perhaps now is the time to think of pulling away and not to be tied to just raising funds for them. A former chairman told me it is inconceivable that the Friends were not involved in the planning or setting up of this new group. or at the very least notified about it. It is also apparent that despite having been a faithful support group for the museum service for the last 72 years, it appears to count for very little in the current situation. He also told me, according to Len Drinkle, who was a founder member, the forming the Friends was the result of a meeting held at the Town Hall in November 1948, where the mayor explained that on numerous occasions over a long period of time, various people had suggested to him that a Society of Friends of Colchester and East Essex Museum should be formed to further the aims and interests of the museum. The first provisional meeting took place on the 14th of December 1948, and the first general meeting took place on the 1st of March 1949. The mayor at the time was Leonard Dancy, one of the great Colchestrians of the 20th century, a man who had a great passion for Colchester's history and heritage. The membership of the Friends of the Colchester Museums is large, and its meetings are exceptionally well attended. These are people with a passion and a commitment to our museums, yet they have been snubbed in an appalling way. An extract from the CMDF website says it's there to looking for individuals and organisations to help raise funds and support the foundation, but presumably not the Friends of the Colchester Museums. Getting involved can be tailored to personal circumstances, and options range from putting spare change into a donation box at one of Colchester's museums to volunteering time, purchasing a Colchester Museum's Guardian membership, becoming a corporate member, making a one-off donation, and even by leaving a legacy donation in a will. But hurry if you want to become a member, because at a cheaper rate, because it finishes at midnight tonight. In conclusion, Chairman, this new organisation said it's there to forge links within the local community. It's totally ignored the Friends of the Colchester Museum.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Can I ask Councillor Laws to come in on this? I think it's his department.
Thank you, Sir Bob. I know you come at this from the right place, and you're right to highlight the historic work done by the Friends. I have to admit, you've given me a history lesson this evening, and I will welcome a further history lesson on all of this. I've heard the concerns about this, and I've ensured that a mobile phone number for a senior manager in the museum is available, so that any of the Friends wish to have a direct conversation, they can. I am also welcome in a public capacity, and if needs be, on a confidential basis, to take any concerns directly. I welcome the challenge. I would add to all of this, though, that for me, the idea that we have lots of vehicles of enthusiasm to support our heritage and our museum services doesn't necessarily scare me in the way that potentially some of what Sir Bob is hearing might be the case. But obviously perception is reality, so I accept that if that is the fear, that is the fear. But I would also point out that, for example, the great work that former Mayor and Councillor Henry Spivey did with raising the funds and awareness about the Roman walls, that was an organisation that actually has folded. And so I'm not saying that the Friends of the museum are going to fold. It sounds like there's lots of enthusiasm there, but for the council to have a vehicle, it doesn't seem unreasonable to me that there is a formal vehicle that this council has some control over, if that's about attracting corporate monies. It doesn't scare me that much, and I welcome the live conversation. I think we can have one, and I welcome Sir Bob's enthusiasm and a guidance in his role and in his experience on this. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Sir Bob, you have a minute to reply.
Chairman, I had hoped for a better reply. One of the trustees of the Colchester Museum Development Foundation is a member of the Friends of the Ipswich Museums, but apparently no place can be found on the Colchester Museums Development Foundation for a member of the Friends of the Colchester Museum, which strikes me as being odd. Now, this is something this administration inherited, so I was hoping this administration would be able to put right and quickly, very quickly, try and restore the unhappiness, overcome the unhappiness which has been caused, and there's been no explanation as to why the Friends of the Colchester Museum have been totally ignored throughout this process. So it's really a suggestion from me. This is quite an easy win, I would have thought, to say that the Colts Museums Development Foundation should work with the Friends of the Colts Museum and not put up barriers. And why on earth is one of the 12 trustees, and not one of them is a member of the Friends of the Colts Museums, yet a member of the Friends of the Ipswich Museums is a trustee? What's that all about?
I will look into it further, but I think, you know, you all know that the relationship we have with Ipswich is integral to the operation of the museum service. But your specific point about a friend being on the governance of it, I will take that back and look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Thank you, Councillor Laws. The next speaker is Councillor Dave Harris, who I believe is joining us remotely. Councillor Harris, are you?
Hello there.
Good evening.
Good evening, Cabinet. Good evening, leaders.
You're on mute. We can't hear you at the moment.
Mine said I'm working. Hello?
We still can't hear you.
I am speaking. Hello, can you hear me?
Have we got any sound?
No, I'm hearing myself here.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Harris. We've got silence at the moment. You don't appear to.
I'm talking. And I'm not muted.
They're just looking at the technicalities.
Should I keep talking to fill in the gap and you can see when I cut in?
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. It looks like Councillor Harris is unmuted. So there might be an issue with his microphone.
Well,
we're not getting any audio feed, Councillor Harris.
Owen, can you hear me?
Can I suggest then that we go to the next have your say and then we come back to Councillor Harris in 3 minutes' time, and in the meantime perhaps you can see if you can resolve the technical issues. Is that good? Thank you. We'll be back with you as soon as we can, Councillor Harris. Our next speaker is Councillor T. Young.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Cabinet. I want to talk to you tonight about and hopefully get your support for asking the government to reconsider the imminent cut to universal credit. This is going to affect a number of residents, most vulnerable residents in the borough. Let me give you some local context first. This is from Colchester Borough Homes. There are a total of 1,613 CBH tenants claiming universal credit at the end of July 2021. 475 of those are in my ward. And the calculation is that the £20 universal credit reduction equates to a total loss of around £1.68 million a year for those tenants. Obviously, this will have a damaging effect on incomes and the ability to clear rent arrears. Over 60% of UC cases are in arrears, but it's difficult to know exactly what the impact will be as individuals will manage this in different ways. CBH say that the housing officers and the financial inclusion team will continue to provide advice and support, and we will look to make reasonable arrangements when paying back arrears starting at a minimum of £5 per week. A respected website called Housing Systems says, despite calls for a further extension, it is looking like this lifeline that has helped so many will be removed as planned, meaning that a majority of universal credit claimants will then see a reduction in their standard allowance of £20 per week, £86.67 per month from October 2021. I will send you more information because I've got more than 3 minutes worth here. It is important to note, though, that nearly 40% of claimants on universal credit are in work. And when it's been put out there to Colchester residents, they've sent me back from some testimonies that are really quite heartrending in places. I'll read some of them if I may. Totally agree that £20 is not a lot in the greater scheme of things to the government, but to the people who need it, it's a cut that will mean they can no longer tread water like they're able to do at present. For those who are already drowning, it will be catastrophic. We will lose £83 as of 6th of October. That's almost a week's rent or shopping. Same as me, I started work and I won't be any better off. We will lose £86 next month, not good. That's food, shopping or gas or electric or council tax. Universal credit is a hard struggle. You have to learn to go without, as you have to pay your rent and other bills. So you can see that this is something that's going to affect residents in every ward. The Department of Work and Pensions, according to press reports, have done research into the impact of the scrapping of the universal credit supplementary payment, but aren't prepared to release the information. You have to wonder why, don't you? Conservative MPs, including those representing Waveney and Carlisle, have written to the government urging them to reconsider this cut, which will cause a great deal of misery and suffering. The effect on the food bank and other charities will be enormous, and the social cost of this cut is incalculably huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I do understand the difficulties around this. You know, I know we recognise that it was a temporary uplift, along with a lot of other benefits which were given during the COVID crisis, and it does. It's very easy to introduce them, but it's very, very difficult to take them away. Not just universal credit, but particularly I'm thinking around the end of the furlough scheme and that. If you could send me the extra information, I am very willing to be educated and find out more. We have an agenda item later this evening where we are setting some of the future work programme of the policy panel. And I think one of those items is going to be that they are going to look at what this authority can do to better support people who are suffering with the £20 reduction. So it will be interesting to see what they come up with. Has any other cabinet members wish to say anything? No, I understand what you say, and if you can send me the extra information, I will be interested to read it all I can. You have a minute to respond if you like.
Thank you, Chair. That's encouraging. I would hope that you would join many of us, including a lot of Conservative councillors and MPs who are urging the government to reconsider. Let me just leave you with one last testimony, because this brought a lump to my throat. She says, it's not just that, with places and everywhere upping their prices of stuff too, it's a joke. I'm a celiac, as are my kids. A loaf of bread for us is £1.80 to £4, and we go through a loaf in 3 days. The one we get is £2.40, so twice a week, £5 on bread alone, plus fish fingers, £3 for a pack of 12, that's just one meal. We can't get cheap ones as they have to be gluten-free. Pizzas, £3, pasta, £1.80, pasta sauce, £1.50, cheese, £3, chips, £3. That's just 3 meals off my shopping list, and that's £18 to £19. Not even a week's worth of dinners, and yet they want to cut my budget. When you get no help, being celiac is a disease, not a lifestyle choice. We have to live with it and don't even get help from the NHS anymore. I get flour for my daughters and that's it, to make stuff with them, but I still have to buy the other ingredients. I asked for bread, but was told that wasn't an option. Can you imagine the impact of losing £86 a month on that family? I just think this isn't an issue for me about party politics. This is an issue about morality and humanity. So please, I will send you all the information, and if you could join with us in asking the government to reconsider, I'd be very, very grateful, as would many of my residents.
Thank you. And I shall certainly be reading it. Thank you. Have we had any luck with Councillor Harris?
Leader, I think we've identified the setting that needed changing. So if you're happy to go ahead, and if we could just test Councillor Harris's audio, you should be able to hear from him.
We can indeed. Councillor Harris, would you like to just see if we can hear you?
Yes, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
We can hear you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for you sorting the problem out. I wanted to start off by my heartfelt support for Councillor Tim Young, what he just said. So fully supporting what he said there, because it makes you weep to hear such stories. But I wanted to talk to you, Leader, and the Cabinet about the recent full council meeting when we talked about Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, 70 years of service. And you know that we all, every councillor there, supported doing something and making it easier to get the communities doing things in that year. Since that time, it's given me and my councillor colleagues in Beerchurch to talk to residents and to discuss with other people what we want to do. Now, the Monkwick Residents Association, Leader, luckily, their fun day they have every year, which is always supported by the free Beer Church ward councillors is always the first Saturday in June. Well, as you know, Leader, it's the weekend extended bank holiday that they've picked for the Platinum is that very weekend. So that's going to be really easy to do. We can brand that, the Resident Association can brand that, and they want to brand that as a celebration, a community coming together to do something there. Now, neighbourhood watchers in Beer Church have tended to have fun days as well, Leader. Now, they tend to be on public fields and we get permission from the council, insurance, etc. But my appeal to you and my question really, and looking for support from the Cabinet and to appeal to those that charge us to have road closures, is for the people that don't want to have the normal fun days, this experience that they have, they want to do it in their own street, you know, the traditional table in the middle of a street with children, elderly people, people coming together and enjoying what is going to be a brilliant celebration, need to have it A, easy to apply for, and B, to have and ensure that it's not a costly exercise. Now, if you can help us lobby for that as a Cabinet, we councillors across the whole of Colchester, I'm sure, would want to make sure communities are fully involved, motivated, and get together and make a community stronger by the Queen having done that many years. It's a good community event. So those two, please, for me, because we want to develop, don't we, as a borough, and make sure we don't miss the deadline. And that's why I'm bringing it to your table now, so that we've got time to plan this and make sure it works effectively and constructively. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Some very good points there. And I think a lot of those come in Councillor Law's department. You okay?
Councillor Harris, thank you very much for your words, and it's great to hear that your residents are as enthusiastic as so many of us are about the Platinum Jubilee next year. And I think, yes, it is incumbent, isn't it, on this authority and indeed our friends at Highways to make it as easy as possible for communities to come together. And if they want to have certain streets closed in order to have the traditional street parties that we're also familiar with in terms of seeing imagery from the past, then yes, we should be doing that. And we should be doing it in a way which is easy for our residents, easy for our communities, and doesn't have costs or stress, which I think was the undertone of what I was getting from Councillor Harris's contribution. But we will look at it and make sure that everything that can be done to make it easy. So it's good luck with your party. I won't be in Monkwick for that weekend, but I will be partying with you in spirit.
Thank you. Councillor Harris. One more minute.
Thank you for the reply and thanks for the positive response. Thank you. And I want to make sure that the Mayor looks like he's going to be very busy, don't you think, the whole of Colchester? So I wish him well in his work for that year.
I think you're right. I think he's going to be very busy indeed. But I think it'll be a very good year and a great year to be Mayor, I think, as well. Thank you, Councillor Harris. I'll next have your say speaker is Councillor Fox. Councillor Fox, you have the usual 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Leader. I wanted to raise this evening the issue of the impact of the last few weeks in Afghanistan, not because it's a national or international issue, but because it impacts us here locally in Colchester. I know how much concern there has been amongst local residents, both for the fantastic efforts of Colchester-based troops who went out to rescue so many people, both British nationals and Afghans as well, but also for the reaction of the community to those seeking refuge here in the UK, and the donations and the support that's been made to charities and to those families that have begun to arrive in Colchester in particular. I now welcome the email that you sent to group leaders the other day, and I hope that we will be able to recognise the efforts of all those in our armed forces who served over the last 20 years in Afghanistan. We know what an impact it had, both in terms of the toll of lives and injuries for soldiers as well. But I truly believe that the work that was done by our armed forces there was necessary and worthwhile. And I just wanted also to ask really about the work that's going on to support those families that are arriving in Colchester, and maybe the portfolio holder for communities could update us on the support that is being provided. And also really to ask whether we're receiving the level of support that we need from the government as well. There's obviously going to be pressures in terms of housing, but also in terms of other local services as well. And I really hope that the funding that the government can provide will be sufficient. And if not, we make a strong case that we need resources to ensure that we can help to support those families to settle, to start a new life, and to integrate alongside a welcoming, open community here in Colchester.
Thank you. Yes, firstly, I would totally agree with echo your comments about our military service in Afghanistan. I think it's important that we, as a military town, recognise that, and I know that I've already been in contact with the mayor that I think that it would be good to see some civic recognition and thanks, but I think that should come from the civic side. But I think certainly, I know we've had some correspondence that the next full council, I think it would be good if from the political side and councillors also recognise that, and hopefully we can all work together to do so. In terms of Afghanistan refugees, Colchester was one of the first councils to agree to the request from MHCLG to assist. I think ourselves, Chelmsford and Hertsmere were the first three in the country, so I'm quite proud that we were. And we were, I think, the first or second authority to have them arrive after they'd been in managed isolation for COVID. Initially, most of if you like, the wraparound service at the moment has been provided by the Home Office, actually, and they have been doing a good job of that. Obviously, as time goes on, we accept that we will probably have to pick up some of the service, and I'm confident from having spoken to our officers that we're going to be in a position to do so. But at the moment, it's been very much provided by the Home Office. In terms of financial support, the financial support offered via MHCLG has been quite significant, particularly around obtaining private renting houses. I personally have, I think it needs perhaps a slight adjustment in terms of the time period, in the sense that there's been a lot offered per month, but actually we probably don't need quite so much per month, but we could do with it slightly longer. So the total figure is fine, but I think some feedback, I know there's been feedback from a number of authorities from their practical experience on the ground, that it may be needed adjusting, and I think they are taking that on board. I know we've had some Office of Housing locally. I believe that one family has been rehoused already from hotel accommodation. We do still have some families in hotel accommodation in Colchester, but certainly thus far it's looking a good support package and quite positive. And I think all of us, I know all 51 councillors will join with me in being proud of Colchester being one of the first towns to welcome them, and pledge to do whatever we can to make sure that if they choose to stay in Colchester, and they don't have to, because they have a full leave to remain, so they can go wherever they want. And we are expecting that they will go to other places, not just in Colchester. I'm sure all 51 of us as members of the council will welcome them. I don't know if Councillor Oxford wishes to add any more.
Thank you, Leader. I think you covered it a lot better than I could have done, but if you want me to find anything else out for you, just let me know and I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fox, you have a minute to reply.
Thank you very much. It's really positive to hear, and I certainly would echo what you said about perhaps needing a longer package of support for people, because it can take some time to decide where to settle and to think about the sorts of skills that people will need to enter the job market as well. And, I know that we've got a lot of experience having previously supported refugees from Syria as well. And I think, it's good to hear the work that's already going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor Pearson, who is joining us remotely. I think. Councillor Pearson, are you with us?
I am, Leader.
Good evening. I think you know the format. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to item 11 and the policy panel suggestions for work. I know when you attended the first meeting of the policy panel in this municipal year, Leader, that you were very generous with your words about the panel's activities and about Cabinet being open-minded towards appropriate initiatives, starting either with the panel and its members or with members of the public. And that despite the amended terms of reference that were agreed at the annual meeting for the panel. And I know that you were aware that councillors of all parties at that meeting were particularly exercised that the panel had a role to play in this current municipal year. I think the Deputy Mayor has made an eloquent case for consideration of how Colchester Borough Council might assist the many residents of the Borough of Colchester likely to be affected by the removal of the universal credit top-up. And that was something that we considered at the last policy panel meeting needed to be addressed in a bit more detail. I know that you're also aware that it's about 2 years now since the council unanimously passed the resolution on the climate emergency. Yet I've attended planning committee meetings recently, substituting for Councillor Warnes, and it still seems as though we haven't moved on with some of our planning policies. So again, the policy panel thought that it was appropriate that at this particular time we need to do something. We need to have some action around how the authority implements the resolution that was made by Council 2 years ago. So I would hope that Cabinet will look very positively at the recommendations that came from the policy panel and that you will agree to the work programme that's included in your agenda this evening, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I won't do the agenda backwards and preempt discussion on point 11I. I think we are going to look quite open-mindedly at the suggestions coming from the policy panel in terms of the work programme. I do think just on the planning one, and I know that the monitoring officer has had some correspondence with the chair over this, it does seem that there is an issue over a clash of terms of reference, particularly with the local plan committee. The planning committee ultimately, when considering applications or when they're recommended or not, we are constrained by SPDs and DPDs, which are laid down primarily in the local plan. Once they are set, and of course we have just adopted a new local plan, section 1, which includes a raft of new SPDs, which dictate how the planning committee consider those. So I think there's a question over whether the policy panel really is the right place to consider that. But certainly I think on the other items, we are going to be quite open-minded and probably you will be pleased that the decision will take. I don't know, Councillor Ellis, do you wish to comment anything on the planning side, as it's your?
Not particularly, Chairman, other than I think actually it's legitimate to highlight it, but I do think it sits with the local plan committee. But it doesn't mean that the local plan committee shouldn't start doing some work on that if we feel that it's been overlooked. It's something that I know Karen Sarrett has on the agenda to do. I just think it needs to be, maybe that needs to be accelerated. So happy with it, but I think it is, and as the monitoring officer has said, it is the right place to take it, is the local plan panel. It's done no harm to highlight the issue. I think the policy panel highlighting it means it could be accelerated, so thank you.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, obviously we adopted just in February this year, section 1, which included a raft of new SPDs. So they are our SPDs till we review the local plan, I would imagine, but obviously it is right, I think, for the local plan committee to start looking at what we want to include next time. Councillor Pearson, you have 1 minute to reply.
Thank you, Leader. I will take on advisement. I hope that now local plan committee will look at that as a priority. I think the intention of the policy panel was to ensure that something was happening and that we were taking on board the decisions that were made by full council. I say it's 2 years ago now. Time we put our words into action. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a good point, and I think it's be valuable to remind the local plan committee of the commitment the council made. Our next speaker is Councillor Goss, who is also joining remotely. Councillor Goss, are you with us?
Hello, good evening. Hope you can hear me.
We can indeed. Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to go back to the previous minutes because I did ask 3 questions, and I know we had some audio problems last time. Obviously, we've had some earlier tonight, so I just want to re-ask those questions because they were never actually answered. I was promised that you would listen to the recording and would get back to me, so we'll have to go over it again, but here we are. So the first point I raised last time was around the quality of grass cutting from ID Verdi, our outsourced partner, and that some of the recent work undertaken just falls short of quality that residents and councillors expect in Colchester. I've seen grass cutters mushing up litter on the Northern Approach Road. I've seen it happen on Cowdrey Avenue. I've seen it happen on Avenue of Remembrance and Simblind Approach as well. And these have all been highlighted, complaints have been highlighted, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better. So for the relevant portfolio holder, can they please tell me what action is being taken, because we can't continue to have this less than acceptable level of service. Second question is around fixing the link. Councillor Oxford did answer about the camera, which I highlighted had been installed, but I do believe a scheme was designed, a much greener scheme, removing the elephant and putting green sculpturing on the roundabout and then trees in planters along North Station Road. So I'd like to get an update on that, because we have Greater Anglia funding this, Essex County Council, and also Colchester Borough Council as well. And then the third question I had, which I sort of got a slightly potted response to, was around the River Colne and green algae on it. I know it was a big thing for the Conservatives because they kept giving me questions about it when I was portfolio holder, but I was just surprised that they didn't put any money into the budget to do something about it if they genuinely felt that strong about it. So I'd like a genuine response on that, because I don't think I got one last time when I asked that question. And then I've got some new questions as well. I'd like to know what's happening at the Northern Gateway. Before the change of administration, a request was put forward to officers to put some extra security in the Northern Gateway. In the exact area the travellers, the travelling community recently got into 2 weeks ago. I know they've left today and they're now in the Parkham Ride, so it's now Essex County Council's issue to resolve legally. So I'd like to know what's happening to put extra bollards into stop them from being straight over some curbs and onto green fields, because that was requested before the change of administration, and it doesn't appear to have happened. I'd also like to know what's happening with the broken paving in the high street where the grout has failed. We have a year's guarantee on that. We spent £240,000, and it's falling away, and we need to make sure that that is reinstated. So I have been on to Essex County Council about it. So again, just to make sure we don't forget that, because we funded £120,000 of that from taxpayers' money last year.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. Firstly, my apologies if things were missed in the minutes from last time. I know we did have a lot of communication difficulties, but we heard you loud and clear this evening, notwithstanding the loud motorbike outside. I will just pick up myself before going to other cabinet members on the grass cutting. It's something which I'd be very conscious of. There have been problems with the contractor for a variety of reasons, which I think we're aware of, but there has been a lot of work performance managing it by officers over the last few weeks. And certainly from what I've seen around the borough, it might not have got perfect, but it's got a lot better. Interestingly, one of the items which I think is being considered by the policy panel is looking forward to what we wish to do with some of the grounds maintenance contracts in future. It's, I think, up for renewal in 2023. So we will want to consider what we do then. On the other items, it may well be that we have to check up and give some written answers, but would any other cabinet members? Well, Councillor Oxford, I think you're indicating, I think some of it's in your department.
I do get a bit confused with the grass cutting is Councillor Crowe or me, because it depends on whereabouts it is. It falls sometimes in mine and then it crosses over to you. I'll have to find out about fixing the link. I didn't get that question at all. And I think that's all that is me, is that one. I think the other bits are Councillor Crowe.
Councillor Crowe, would you like to come in?
Okay, thank you for your questions, Councillor Goss. It's a relief to be able to hear you properly this time. Last time it sounded like you were channeling Norman Collier in his broken microphone. You asked about the river algae, and I will make a point of saying that you did say that Conservative councillors and members of the public too asked full council and cabinet about the problem with the algae. And you will recall that we were repeatedly told it was the Environment Agency's problem and not the council's. And it took a phone call from myself to the Environment Agency to actually learn that it wasn't their responsibility. And we're now in a situation where we're looking at the problem. It reoccurs every year when it's hot. It's not been so bad this year. The previous 2 years we had two particularly hot, dry summers, as you will be aware, and that caused the problem. The problem isn't so bad this year, and we know the solution in part is when we have sufficient rainfall, allowing extra water to flow into the river through the park at Middle Mill, so it can wash the algae away downstream and out to sea. And I did learn the other week from talking to a friend of mine, he used to live in a flat in St. Peter Street that actually looked out over the river, that some 15, 20 years ago, there used to be a chap who used to regularly appear during the summer in a boat, and he used to chop up the algae and drag it out of the river with a net and dispose of it. And nobody that I've spoken to seems to recall who that was, who employed him, whether it was the Environment Agency or the council, but I have asked officers to look into that and see what used to happen and see if maybe that could form part of a solution going forward. So, and I do apologise if you felt I didn't come back to you on your question last time. I did review the recording, but I didn't feel there was a question in there. So that's why there was some silence, but you have an answer now anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. What I would just add is I think where we have heard all the questions this time, so I will check subsequent to the meeting with Democratic Services that we've got all the questions noted and that you do receive full replies where relevant. Councillor Goss, you have 1 more minute.
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely hold you to that. As just a point of order on the Environment Agency versus the riparian owner of the where the river through land. Councillor Crowe is correct in saying that Colchester has some responsibility for some clearance if necessary, but the Environment Agency, of course, does get involved when it's looking at danger to wildlife. And of course, they did do some clearance in previous years. And also they do take oxygen levels as well as cutting back some branches. So it is actually a joint approach that we have with the Environment Agency and with Colchester. But thank you for your answer, and I hope the extra info I've given you also reminds you about the joint responsibility and who does what. But I look forward to getting the answers to my other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next Have Your Say speaker is Councillor Corey, who is also joining us remotely, and I can see is there.
Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to absolutely support the comments of Councillor Tim Young earlier, and I think it's really up to us as local authorities and leaders in the area where we see the most local impacts to absolutely comment and reject the £20 cut to universal credit. So absolutely support his comments and support us as a council making a stand on that issue. I also welcomed your comments on the Afghan situation and supporting refugees. And I fully understand that we have to be confidential with these matters and work with government and work with the right partners locally. I welcome that we have once again been positive. Colchester as a community has been positive and constructive in welcoming people over centuries to settle in our community and to add to our community. We did so with Syrian refugees, and we're doing so again with Afghan refugees. What I would just ask, Leader, is I assume it is still within your role to cover communications. And I wanted to really see more communications from Colchester. First of all, to thank our servicemen and women from Colchester who have been over to Afghanistan for years and who have been there just recently sorting out the situation as best as they can after this government and the administration in America's sort of failure, really, in terms of the quick and collapse of Afghanistan's opposition to the Taliban. Our troops can't solve that issue at this point, but I do want to thank them. I want to make sure that's public. I know Councillor Goss emailed you, and you've mentioned, that's been mentioned tonight, you've emailed group leaders. I want to make sure we as a council thank our troops for the efforts that they've put in, keeping people safe and bringing back as many refugees as possible. The second point for me is that when I was leader of the council, I ran the comms side of things, and I would communicate on our website and all of our social media platforms when there are issues such as this, whether it was COVID and coordinating the community efforts, making sure our website was full of messages for support, whether that be for communities or businesses or the wider partners we were working with. We've done it when we've had to cope with feeding children because the Conservative government was not going to do it. So we made sure we coordinated efforts to make sure people knew where they could get food during the holidays when COVID was still raging. We also have done it during the cold periods where we've supported Christmas appeals for homeless clothing and asked again for people to go. We've signposted or we've coordinated ourselves. I do think we are not communicating out about the Afghan situation, about how we can support people, how we can coordinate the efforts. I would thank Colchester Refugee Action and the Colchester Mosque, who have been fantastic in coordinating the efforts, getting so many donations and money in for their appeals. But I do think we need to take a lead. So I want to ask, number one, do you still have communications in your portfolio as leader? Number two, have you had meetings to talk about the communications about the Afghan situation, to talk about the work of our troops, but also about how we can support as a community with donations of money and other produce to help the Afghan refugees? So why aren't we doing more across our social media platforms and our website to ask and coordinate the donations that have been coming forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. I would agree with your general comments about again, agreeing with Councillor Fox about Afghanistan and our troops. In terms of the withdrawal. CBC may be a powerful organisation, but regrettably our influence doesn't go as far as the White House. So that's that. In terms of communications, yes, I do still cover communications. I think actually I wouldn't actually agree that our website hasn't been proactive in communicating a great deal. We still have an excellent comms team within Colchester Borough Council, but I always take on board people's comments and I always listen. And if we can do more to get the word out there in terms of support and donations, I will certainly speak to the comms department and check that they are doing all that they can. Obviously, regarding the Afghan refugees, it was made quite clear to us early on that the Home Office wished us to remain fairly confidential about many aspects of it. That was really for the security and privacy of the people who were arriving at very short notice. So we haven't perhaps been able to say quite as much as we'd like. I've certainly been asked questions by the media about the details of it, and I've kind of actually haven't had much to say apart from saying that we are taking a small number. You know, I from my point of view, I'd like to shout about what Colchester is doing more, but we have been asked told quite firmly to please not do so just at the moment. So that perhaps is one of the reasons why we haven't been quite as proactive as we would like, but I will certainly take your comments on board. I think we have, I think Councillor Laws was first, and then Councillor Lissimore.
Just as we're talking about Afghanistan, there's something I haven't heard tonight, and I just think for the record I want to put it on, which is that obviously this borough has done a fantastic thing to welcome those families here, and Colchester has a proud tradition going back centuries for doing such. But I just wanted to put into your minds, and I'm sure it is all there, but I wanted to put it on record that as well as the refugees that have come here, there are actually existing Afghan-born people living in Colchester. And you may not have encountered them personally, but I have. I've been driven in a taxi by a man from Afghanistan, and I've been served food on this high street from people in Afghanistan. And in the last few days, I had the unfortunate situation of having to listen to a man explain to me that his son went to the airport and his son has not returned to the family home, and that his 3 daughters are not able to leave the house. So I just wanted to put on record that, you know, I as a human being feel awful about that situation for our existing residents and their wider families back in Kabul and wider Afghanistan. And if we do, as human beings, encounter people in our town who have family relations, connections to Afghanistan, it's incumbent on us to reach out and to share empathy with them. As well as the practical things that I know that are being done through the Borough Council, the Home Office, and our Member of Parliament, who I know personally has been helping and assisting in the communications between the Foreign Office over people that are out there now. It is a terrible, terrible situation. I don't think it's way above my pay grade, but as a human being, I care, and I want it on record that Colchester cares about these people who live in our town.
Thank you. Councillor Lissimore.
Thank you. And thank you for Councillor Corey for his points and his questions. I just wanted to add that during that particular week, I did a number of radio and TV interviews. And not only was I very proud to do that, in being able to thank the servicemen and women, thank the Home Office, thank Essex County Council for the work that they had done. But I was also incredibly proud because both the BBC, ITV came to us in Colchester to ask us what we thought. So if Councillor Corey is concerned about communication, I'll be honest, I am not, because the news stations came to us to ask us, Colchester, what we thought and what we were doing. I think that shows that we have got many things right with communication. I can only reiterate again that if anyone who's listening to this has wishes to offer any services, then please contact the Refugee Action in Colchester. And again, it was a fantastic opportunity on both the ITV and BBC to be able to say thank you to the charities that have been working so hard in the last few weeks. Our hands were tied. We could not say very much due to the security, the safety of these refugees. But a huge thank you to Refugee Action Colchester for all the work that they've done. And we welcome these brave people who've put their lives on the line to our community here in Colchester.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, yeah, just to back that up, I mean, in terms of Colchester's commitment to this, I know that we've had good coverage on Anglia News, Look East. I've certainly been on the local radio several times. We were on national radio over the weekend. I think we've been mentioned in pretty much every newspaper as named as the first council to be taking refugees. So I think on that score, I think we have had a considerable amount of coverage, and I think it's something we can be proud of. Councillor Corey, you have 1 minute to reply.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome the comments of Councillor Laws and Councillor Lissimore and your comments just then. It is good to get the publicity. But I was talking about our website, which I've not seen any banners on the front of the website or any key links to explain the coordination of the donations and the efforts there. That's what we have control of and how we can get to our residents the quickest and most effectively, and over social media. You said we've done something. Could you establish what has been done on the website and what has been done on social media? Those comments would be really helpful. I didn't appreciate the flippant comment about our effect on Afghanistan. I didn't talk about that. I was talking about our website and our communications. Of course, I was praising the troops at the beginning and saying that they couldn't change the situation either. What I would say about our troops is that we, in the last administration and with our excellent officers, won the Gold Award for looking after our servicemen and women for the Army Covenant. And I just want to assure and get assurance, really, that we will also support those troops who've recently been there and seen the horrors, sadly, of the suicide bombing, the horrors of thousands of people trying to escape a country, throwing children over walls to get them out. I want to ensure that we are doing everything to support the Army and to make sure that their mental health and their community support them too. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Corey. I am absolutely sure that CBC, whoever the administration is, will always do everything we can to support our troops. As I did mention on the comms front, we were specifically asked not to have banners and things on our website, advertising in very large font, if you like, that the refugees had arrived. We were actually asked not to do that by the Home Office. But I do take on board the point that from now on, I think maybe I will speak to the Comms Department, and if there's more of a message we can get out there, I will do my utmost to make sure that we do. Our next speaker is Councillor Scordis, who I believe is with us. Yes, good evening, Councillor Scordis. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you've had a good summer break, and it was good to see some of you at Colchester Pride as well, outside of politics. So I believe my questions will cover 2 portfolios, which will be Councillor Crowe and Councillor Oxford. The first one is regarding waste and recycling, and concerns around this are, obviously we see from the performance review that we've kind of pretty much met our target on that this year, which is good. But what I'd like to know is what our strategy is moving forward to finally clamp down on those people who are not or who refuse to recycle. We all see it as we walk down streets sometimes where bags are ripped open because food is in there. And when you see those bags, you see plastic, tin, all that kind of thing that could be recycled. So wondering what plans are afoot or are in place to look at tightening up on that. And the second one is on litter. So that's why I say it may come under either of your portfolios. As we've come out of the pandemic, it's noticeable that we're kind of in the same scenario we are with litter. Now, obviously, this isn't the council's fault. People are responsible for their own actions. However, we can play a role in trying to stop that, whether it's behavioural management or enforcement. In the past, I know that we hired a firm to fine people who littered, and I'm wondering if there are any ideas coming forward of how we can clamp down on litter and try and make Colchester a much more cleaner town.
Thank you, Councillor Scottis. I'll go to Councillor Crowe first.
I'll reiterate your comment about Pride on Saturday. It was good to see members of this council there and able to have a chat without politics over a beer in the sunshine when the sun was out briefly. To answer your question, a lot of driving people to recycle is going to come from comms and nudging them towards it. But for a fuller answer, I would like to give you a written answer to that. So I will get that to you as soon as I can.
Councillor Oxford.
Yes, thank you for your question about litter. It drives me up the wall. I do a litter pick every day when I walk my dog. And I do it in the Highwoods Country Park as well. And I am disgusted with the amount of stuff I pick up when a litter bin is just over there. What I am in talks with my officers and things, I don't want to be friendly anymore. I want to fine people. If you are going to drop litter, I want you fined for it. And I want us to be hot on fining people because enough is enough. We are drowning in litter because people are lazy and filthy and cannot be bothered. And I am going to try and put a stop to it. I know when we've tried it in the past, we've had letters in the Gazette saying what a mean, nasty, horrible council we are for doing things like that. I don't care. I want to start fining people as much as I possibly can. So I hope that helps.
Councillor Scottis, and I will just echo Councillor Law's comment there in your comment. It was a good day out Saturday and it didn't rain that much.
Yes, no, I'll just await to see what the plans are. I know when it comes to being nasty over litter, we're all adults. It's not hard to not litter when we're not doing it now and you don't have to do it. So for me, that does make sense that people do need to take responsibility and bit of carrot and stick on both ends, and look forward to hearing what we're going to be doing on improving recycling. Be good to see if those KPIs go up as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Scottis. I think that concludes Have Your Say speakers. Is that correct? We have nobody else. Thank you. Thank you. So conveniently, as Councillor Scottis said, the next item is item 7.1, which is the year-end 2020 to April 2020 to March 21 performance report, strategic action plan. Now, I know this and indeed the subsequent item have been through scrutiny and governance and audit. Both myself and Councillor Nissimore have attended on those occasions, and we've had quite extensive discussions. I'm quite familiar with both of these items. On 7.1, are there any aspects Cabinet members wish to raise on this? Or having looked at it in quite a lot of detail in the past, are we happy to finally approve it off and vote it through? Do any councillors wish to speak? No. Are we agreed then that having looked at the report in a lot of detail in the past, we are happy to accept it and vote it through? Yes, we are.
Chair, just in relation to 7.1, there is a recommendation from the Scrutiny Panel which you may wish to consider.
I beg your pardon, it's not in the main agenda, so I need to delve into the. My apologies for that. I think it within the 122 pages, it's got lost in there.
Leader, it's page 66.
Page 66. Thank you. The recommendation. Oh, I do. Yes, I think that the recommendation that Cabinet raised the profile of communications on environmental and sustainability issues. Well, I think that's something we can quite happily accept. I think that's something we're very minded to do anyway. That's certainly something I'm quite happy to emphasise with our comms department. Are we okay with that? I have no issues with it. Cabinet members, anybody wish to comment further? I think we're minded to accept that recommendation. Yeah, yeah. Well, with that recommendation, I think we accept the report. Agreed. Good. Thank you. I see no dissenters. And 7.2 is the year-end April 2020 to March 21 performance KPI and other performance news. Again, this has been through governance audit and scrutiny. I've certainly seen it several times and we've had some extensive discussions on it. I think where we have seen some, what's the word I'm looking for, KPIs quite out of kilter. I think we know why, which is the important thing. And I think they can pretty much be delivered at the door of the events of the last 18 months. Has any Cabinet members got any comments they wish to make on this? And are there any recommendations we need to take? I don't think there are any on this, are there? So I think we just need to approve it. Are we approved? Approved, agreed. Okay. Thank you. So item 8 is communities, policy panel recommendations on options for COVID-19 commemorations. We have received a recommendation from the policy panel. I'll go to Councillor Oxford in a moment. I think most of it we agree with. I think I was a little bit concerned with some of the wording referring a lot to festivals and celebration. I understand where they're coming from with it, but I'm always slightly worried about some of that wording. So I think we have come up with some very slightly revised wording for this item. I think if I go to Councillor Oxford, okay, Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, Leader. Although COVID has been devastating for so many in such traumatic ways, we have a lot to be thankful for. And I would like to personally thank all those involved for their hard work and dedication and doing their best to keep residents safe. Colchester has done what Colchester does best: see a need and fill it. Give help, support, because it's the right thing to do. We should all be proud. And I thank the policy panel for their recommendations with some changes and totally agree there should be commemorations. Item A, I would like that the council supports with guidance and logistical provision, including free hire of venues, the plans for a service of remembrance being developed by the High Steward of Colchester and the Mayor's office, and any other agencies which may wish to be involved, such as emergency services. And point B, that the council puts together a package of support for local community groups, including town and parish councils in the borough who wish to bring about their own memorials or events, and with C and D to be the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Any other members of the committee wish to comment on this? So are we happy accepting that slightly revised recommendation? I see agreement all round, then that is accepted with those revisions. So I hope we've got that down. Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Item 9.1, unlocking the potential of Colchester's High Street and Town Centre, which was from a motion submitted to full council. And we have one speaker, I believe, on this, which is Councillor Fox. Councillor Fox, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Leader, and it's great to be able to speak about this finally. It's a shame we didn't get to speak about it at full council. I think that it would have been a useful debate to hear from members from across the chamber, and I don't think there was anything particularly controversial in the motion that we couldn't have found agreement on. But I do think that COVID and the pandemic has shone a light on some of the issues, and that there are sort of structural things that need to change about our town centres in order for them to be more successful. I think that Colchester's got a fantastic town centre and there's lots to build on. And my motion was very much along the lines of thinking about, what are the good things that we've already got. It's where people do their weekly shop, pick up prescriptions or a coffee, but it's also where we meet friends, go to the theatre, catch a film, visit one of our fantastic museums or galleries. We've got, an award-winning park in Castle Park. And at night, the town comes to life with live music, comedy shows, and so much more from our arts and culture scene. It also forms the stage for community action and the centrepiece of our civic pride as well. And there are lots of great examples of independent businesses, including those that have opened up during the pandemic as well. New street food stalls, a community hub that's now bigger and better than it was before. We've got We Are the Minories with pop-up art galleries as well. But there are, issues, and there are a lot of people people look on the town centre with nostalgia as well about those stores that have been and gone. Most recently Debenhams, but before that, big chains like Woolworths and independents like Jack's as well. So I think there are sort of 5 key outcomes from the motion. The first is transparency, and that's wanting to know who owns our high street, and where vacancies come up, that there's an opportunity, I think, for the council, for the business improvement district, who do fantastic work as well, to really make it known to people that they can, use those areas. And I think there's a role for the council in terms of transparency in saying, look, we know who owns these shops and buildings. Why don't we make that information known to the public so that people with great ideas for new businesses, community groups, cooperatives who want to take over those buildings and put them to good use could do that. And I think that, there's a role for employees, shoppers and the community to come together in terms of that community effort. And community power, so that local communities and the council itself could take over and reopen empty shops, involving more local people, including the growing number of people who are living in the town centre and who are going to be living in the town centre as well. We know there's going to be much more of a residential feel to our town, and that we should make the most of those who live just in those outlying areas from the town centre to make use of it as well. And to hopefully make use of the improved walking and cycling facilities that are coming, so that we can reduce traffic congestion and pollution in the town centre as well. I think that post-COVID, we really need to reform the tax system so that we stop penalising local shops with unfair and disproportionate business rates, while online giants get away with it. And once and for all, that's why one of the outcomes of the motion was to write to the government, because I think that COVID-19 has shown that there's an unfair system in place. And despite any previous consultations or consultations that the government have done, I think now is the time that we ought to be telling them what impact it's having here in Colchester. And then finally, I think there's something around devolved funding. For me, the town deal is fantastic, and it provides us with an opportunity to do some great things. But I don't think that we should have had to ask somebody in Whitehall, who knows exactly how we could have spent that money. I think the businesses, residents, and the council and others here in Colchester, we already knew what we needed, and we missed out on some of those projects that we'd like to have have covered. So I do think there's something about opportunities to make more of our decisions locally rather than having to go back and forth to the government every time that there's a new pot of money, and there are lots of other pots of money. You know, there's the Levelling Up Fund, and there's a green fund, and I think that the government would be far better off just devolving the money and the power to local councils as well to get on with it. So, you know, I don't think there's anything particularly controversial in the motion. And I hope that you could accept all the recommendations from it and build on what is a great town centre, but one that could be even better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Laws, I think this is your portfolio.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. I think the thrust of where you're coming from is from a good place, and it's great to hear your enthusiasm to support the Old Town Centre. I think we should also acknowledge in this conversation this evening that there are many other small businesses out there. There are some 5,000 people working on Severals Business Park. And I know this motion wasn't intended to discuss things outside of the core High Street and Old Town, but I think it is worthy of note that we are lucky in Colchester in some respects to have more smaller businesses than some towns and cities have had. And I know that those particular places have had really challenging times of late, and it gives us an opportunity in the long run, particularly with the good work that's going on with digital clustering around Queen Street, the 5G and the broadband there, to actually build upon all of that. You will know, as I've talked about for many years in this place, as a member of the public, that I've always been passionate about the opportunity of the Old Town Centre. I think we have reached a consensus now whereby we all cross-party acknowledge that the opportunity for public realm is a huge opportunity, and one that Colchester has in spades compared to many other towns and cities because of our 2,000 plus year heritage and everything that's happened in between. It's worth noting that the museum service is now specifically interested in looking at public realm opportunities outside of the castle itself, so that's a great thing. Looking down the list of things that you seek to resolve, I will defer to the leader to sum up on them, because I think, for example, that writing to the government might actually be unnecessary given that the government's already looking at it. But I will defer to the leader to comment. I was very interested to see your enthusiasm for the enforcement, the planning enforcement opportunity around section 215. And I think if you feel, and if anyone watching, listening feels that there are opportunities to have conversations with landlords about that. I know that we have in the past, we've had a challenge on Crouch Street, haven't we? It's also really pleasing to see that where some landlords who are the custodians of old buildings have been proactive off their own back. I look, for example, on the corner of Head Street to Sir Isaac's Walk, a building that was, people watching, listening may recall, St Hospice charity shop and a party shop. That building has been renovated to a really excellent standard, and the frontage is going to contribute towards an enhanced public realm, and that stuff does matter. And I know that we're also looking at working with the bid and other partners at how we can improve the signage, because we are behind where we need to be on signage as a live conversation that's going to happen. I praise the bid. I praise Culver Square. I praise Red Lion, who I think in the last year have really stepped up. You can see visibly the improvements there. There is going to be some exciting news coming soon about a Roman mosaic in that vicinity that I'm really excited about. I welcome your support, Councillor Fox, for doing everything that this council can to encourage small business in this town. And I defer to the leader to talk about some of the resolutions.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. Yeah, I would agree that there's not an enormous amount in this to disagree with, and I would certainly echo Councillor Fox's comments about our town centre. What I've been very heartened by actually since the spring, really, as lockdown was lessened, is how quickly it does seem to bounce back. I've been really surprised just how busy Colchester is a lot of the time, and that does seem to be reflected in some of the data coming out in terms of vacancies for premises. The figures I've seen that we're actually doing very well in comparison with our competitors, which is very good. I mean, the only part of the motion I am perhaps a little bit uneasy with is the first bit, simply because, as you know, there is a fundamental review of business rates consultation going on at the moment. So I just worry that as a council, asking for something which is already happening, we kind of look like we don't know what's going on. I don't know, did we put in a submission to that consultation as a council when it was available and what we said? Do we know? If not, why not? That's probably something we'd ask the previous administration. I mean, I actually put in a submission personally because I deal with a lot of people who pay business rates, and I see a lot of the issues, and I put one in on behalf of the group, my group. I suspect perhaps the Labour and Lib Dem groups also put a submission in. There was an interim report published in March. They have deliberately delayed publishing a final report because publishing a final report in March when we were still in lockdown, I think the government recognised correctly that would be a bit daft because we need to take account of exactly what effect the last 18 months has on the behaviour of people and businesses. It's quite interesting though, reading, I've read the interim report. There's quite a range of views in there, as you would expect. They talk about the online sales tax, and actually it's quite interesting that a lot of the respondents from some of the smaller retailers felt that it wouldn't actually help a lot because they felt that the main motivation of people buying online rather than the shop was convenience and choice. It wasn't price. In actual fact, they were already paying a lot more online. Certainly I can think of items which, if I could mention one large online retailer, which if you pay them a certain amount per month, you get free delivery. You will find something on there for £7.99, which is £2 in your local shop, and people still buy them for £7.99. So I suspect if we're at £8.99, they would still be paying them or buying it from there. So it's worth a read, anybody who hasn't read it. And if we have fundamentally disagreed with the opinions which come out in the final report, I think, yes, that is the time at which we say, I'm sorry, we don't think you're right. But I just feel we kind of look like we've been asleep and doing so after the horse has bolted. You know, if we wanted to ask for a fundamental reform of business rates, we should have responded to the fundamental reform of business rates consultation. But other than that, I am quite happy with the rest of the recommendations. We are constrained, obviously, no doubt, by the law, particularly around obtaining information and making public ownership. I'm sure there are legal and GDPR and other privacy issues around that, but I take the sentiment absolutely. And you see buildings empty and you think, why is that empty? Who the hell owns it? Can't we do something about this? And so I absolutely understand the drive behind it. And I think if we can do something, we should. So I'm happy to accept it with the exception of the first item, just because I think the first line about writing or requesting the fundamental review of business rates. I don't know if other cabinet members wish to, I'll come back to Councillor Fox afterwards as well. Councillor Missingwell.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Fox, for coming tonight again. Yes, I just have a few concerns. I concur with Councillor Dundas with regards to the first item. Yes, obviously we can explore the creation of community improvement districts. What conclusion we will come to, I do not know, but I do believe that the bid are already working with certainly the town centre communities to improve their lot. And I know through some of the consultations that have gone on recently through the bid that they have really engaged with the areas that they cover. However, I would be very interested to see how we could use community improvement districts on perhaps local shopping areas. We have a number of those. I can think of St John's, Crittygate, Shrub End, Highwoods, where we have local shopping areas. How can we improve those? How can we link them in with the bid that are obviously based within the town centre? I do have a concern of the wording of item 3, make any data held by the council on ownership of hybrid properties public and in an accessible format. There has to be some commercial sensitivities here. And I think it would be very difficult. The bid and Colchester Borough Council would do anything within their powers to help local groups use empty shops. But there is obviously commercial sensitivity. So I will be honest, I have an issue with item 3 because I don't see how we can actually do that. Obviously agree with planning enforcement. I've seen there's some wonderful shops in Colchester town centre at the moment that are actually being used by art groups, for example. We had Slack Space a number of years ago as well, which was really inventive and really brought to life empty shops. So very happy for planning enforcement to do whatever they can and to use vacant premises in an imaginative way. But I'll be honest, I do have an issue with paragraph 3.
Thank you, Councillor Lismore. I think perhaps while we ponder paragraph 3, and maybe see if we can find some wording which takes account of legal aspects and confidentiality. I don't know if maybe we can do that. I am aware now that this isn't actually a form of debate, but Councillor Goss has raised his hand. In the spirit of sensible discussion, if Councillor Goss has a very brief point, if he'd like to come in very briefly, he is welcome to do so.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Apologies, I should have been registered to speak on this because it was a joint motion item. I just want to say very quickly that the motion referred to Cabinet shouldn't be contentious. As it says, Cabinet will know we have healthy high streets. They're essential for community cohesion, civic pride, employment and shopping and much more. Many were struggling before the COVID pandemic. Although Colchester's town centre has fared better than many, they have lost many shops that were valued. And I know from talking to businesses that it is a make or break year. We know they highly value the support of the council from the last year. And we can all be proud of the work that was undertaken. It was award-winning, 3rd best in the country for the pace of grant support and notable for the quality of relationship and joint work with the bid, amongst others. But this year, the challenge again is how we might best give businesses the confidence to continue. The proposals we tabled are great examples of what could make a real difference for the longer term, and this will command wider party support. I hope overall you will agree, and as the current administration, help us in campaigning for better. Reforms are long overdue that will keep money in the pockets of our hard-pressed businesses, that strengthen the community links, that help customer loyalty and town centre footfall, not least business rate changes that level the playing field between online and high street businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. I'll just add, I don't think most of it is very contentious. I think it's just a case of making sure that we have wording which is actually deliverable. I think Councillor Lismore has had a thinking cap on.
I would be quite happy with item 3 if we added with limitations due to commercial sensitivity and GDPR legislation. Yes,
I think the Chief Executive just wants to come in.
Chair, I wondered if I might be able to try and simplify it even more for you, if that's possible. I was thinking of actually looking at where it says make any data. I would replace the word any with public. So make public data held by the council on ownership of high street properties accessible, full stop. So take out public and in and format. So it's just accessible, so that community groups seeking to buy empty shops through a community share offer have the information they need to do so. I would have thought that would deal with the public. If it's publicly available information, we should be able to make it accessible. I would hope that we would, and if we haven't, we should do so. That then, I think, picks up the point Councillor Lismore is making, which is, if it is commercially sensitive, then clearly it would not be publicly available data. Would that be a simpler form of words that would be acceptable?
Yes, certainly, I agree to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I will actually, in the spirit again of being generous, if Councillor Fox wishes to add anything else briefly.
Thank you very much, Leader, and I appreciate the openness with which you've responded to the motion. I believe that the council did respond to the previous consultation around business rates, and we were clear that they weren't working for local businesses. I understand that you might not want to write to the government on that particular point. Just in terms of making use of empty properties, I think there perhaps is something the council and the bid could do in terms of making it clear to people that they're open to having discussions around, if people see a property and they think, why is that empty? What could it be used for? Because I think the other concern that I have is around poor conversion of empty units in the town centre, and the regulations around permitted development might end up with substandard conversion of properties, even above shop units into poor housing. And we know that there have been recent planning applications locally that have caused concern in terms of office conversion and the like. And so, I think that is, another important point to make. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and I welcome the comments in the debate this evening.
Thank you. I know on your last point, I know that's something Councillor has been vexing Councillor Ellis, and he's looking at very closely as well. So, Cabinet, with those amendments, are we in agreement to accept that? We are. Thank you. Agreed. Okay. And the next item, just check the time, it's 7:30, so we'll carry on, is item 9I. Cultures to Town Deal. Cabinet will consider the recommendation made by Scrutiny Panel in respect of Town Deal at its meeting on the 17th of August 2021. And we have two speakers on this. We have Councillor Corey first and then Councillor Willett. Councillor Corey, who is joining us remotely. Councillor Corey, can you hear us? Where you go.
Yep. Good evening, Leader. Thank you. I just wanted to support the recommendations, of course, as chair of the Scrutiny Panel. And I wanted to thank the Scrutiny Panel for a really good cross-party session where we did have conversations about two parts, really. One was about the scrutiny role that we need to play, because Colchester Borough Council has received the Town Deal funding. Of course, we are working with partners and we're working with the public on how to spend it. But we are the responsible authority. That means we hold the money. That means we are ultimately accountable for how that money is spent. And if overruns occur or overspends occur, then we have to deal with that. So it's really important for us to scrutinise that part. It's also important for us to understand the complete role and structure of the Town Deal Fund. You, Leader, will be understanding more of it, but I think councillors need to understand more now that we have the money. So that was the area of discussion for the first part. The second part was more about the youth services, which of course is important to all of us. The conversation around the youth zone, the conversation about what the allocation would mean, because the youth zone has in effect been dropped from that initial plan. So we talked about what the merits of that. All councillors contributed really well on that. Councillor Willett came forward with a really good suggestion, which I put together and incorporated in point 2. So the second recommendation, which we all supported. So there are two recommendations that are outlined in the report this evening for you. One, I repeat, is about scrutinising the council's role, making sure we understand as the accountable body what we're doing, including risk management oversight of that as well, which again, Councillor Willett was very keen on, and scrutiny of financial decisions. And secondly, B, the Cabinet investigates ways to increase the amount of funding the council contributes into pursuing the creation of a youth zone alongside the Town Deal allocation for funding into youth services of approximately 1 million. So we're talking about the priorities of this Cabinet and whether money could be set aside to ensure we look to make the most of the Town Deal and that youth zone is not lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. And certainly I was present for most of the scrutiny meeting, and certainly it was a good discussion, I thought, and I have to apologise for running out of electricity towards the end, but certainly for what I was able to see, it was a good discussion. Councillor Willett.
Thank you, Leader. I can just about see you. Perhaps we could have the spotlights turned on. It would, speaking on the town deal, I think it was an extremely good piece of scrutiny that was carried out, particularly, as Councillor Corey said, to identify the respective roles and responsibilities of the town deal board and the council, which were significantly unclear to many of us prior to that meeting. And in particular, I was delighted that we were able to clarify what were the governance arrangements, in that they must align with the lead authority for the town deal bid, which of course is us, and the fiduciary arrangements, where it was clarified that CBC Cabinet has to sign off all town deal business cases before they are approved by government, and there is release of funds. And I think that was it was reassuring that we were able to sort out these important points, which were clearly unclear at the beginning of the meeting. The most difficult issue in this piece of scrutiny was, of course, the matter of the youth zone, Leader, where I believe there is widespread political support that the town should have a decent provision. But in the town deal, there was an ask of £2.1 million, but only £1 million was confirmed. So there is this shortfall, plus the recurring revenue costs, which would have to be found elsewhere. We also have to remember, Leader, that CBC is not the statutory provider for youth services, much as we would like to see better youth services provided in the town. But the Chief Executive did confirm that we could provide services under our general powers of competence if the council chose to do so. But he rightly pointed out, and I'm sure he'll point out again today, the difficulties that we would have in obtaining matching fundings, which are normally made to the statutory authority, Essex County Council in this case, and the fact that at the moment there is no site for the provision of a youth zone. There was, of course, disappointment when we were scrutinising this, that there had been a reduction in the amount of money available for the town deal. But as we all know, Leader, government money is tight at the moment, and all town deal bids were pared down, 25 million down to 18 million pounds for authorities of our size. And that was for all authorities of our size. Colchester wasn't just picked on. Also, we must remember that the 6 primary intervention points for the town deal are local transport, digital connectivity, urban regeneration planning, arts, culture and heritage, skills and infrastructure, and enterprise infrastructure. Now, as was pointed out, a clever lawyer could probably argue that the youth zone project was consistent with all 6 of those intervention points. But I think, Leader, the average person on the Halstead omnibus would probably take the same view as the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and see the youth zone more properly waiting for the next initiative or wodge of government cash that comes in our direction. However, the Scrutiny Panel was keen on an all-party basis that we should ask Cabinet to investigate ways of increasing the possibility of matched funds alongside the town deal funds for a youth zone to proceed and be expedited. And we did agree in principle that such an approach should be made, and it's being made today. But unfortunately, in the discussions, it was clear that my colleagues from the Lib and the Lab groups are still rooted in the philosophy that some other entity should always pay the bill. It's abundantly clear to me that we would have to find an additional £800,000 per year from within our current budget if we were to bridge the gap to fund a youth zone. An additional savings of £800,000 would therefore have to be made to current service budgets. And one can recognise the prospect that Cabinet would be asked to find this cash, then get castigated by the opposition groups for making additional cuts to other services. As the proposal for expediting the youth zone is on an all-party recommendation from Scrutiny Panel, it would seem fitting to me, Leader, that an all-party group be asked to recommend to Cabinet where the additional service reduction should be made if we were to fund £800,000 per year for a youth zone. I certainly believe only with an all-party approach to a budget transfer are we likely to see any chance of the youth zone proceeding. So this is a really salient point which Cabinet needs to deal with before I think this project is going to move forward at all. But I certainly support the recommendation being made by the Scrutiny Panel. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you to Councillor Willits. I'll probably got a few things to say, but I'll go to Councillor Laws first, and then I'll pick up on some of the other topics. Councillor Laws.
Thank you to the contributors this evening. I struggle to speak with too much authority on this subject, given that I was only elected in May, and I believe much of the discussions about the specific budget lines for this were well underway before my term in office. I'm firstly grateful that the government has decided to give Colchester nearly £20 million to spend on urban regeneration. That is obviously something we must welcome. And I'm also grateful to our officers and to the We Are Colchester board for all their hard work on this. And the We Are Colchester board who've come up with the budget lines have done so with a breadth of different experiences and walks of life. I'm super excited about the opportunity that £1 million will pose for the final regeneration solution for Jumbo, Holy Trinity Church, and many of the public realm opportunities. I would equally have been excited if the board had proposed, why don't we put some money down to the Hive and create a quasi wet dock down there? Or why don't we put some money towards the country's only Roman circus to better interpret that site? That would have got me very excited as well. But I accept we are where we are, and the bid has proceeded. We've got the money and we need to move forward. I will hand over to Leader now.
Thank you, Councillor Laws, and thank you for the visiting councillors and your contribution. I'll certainly on the scrutiny part. Obviously, the scrutiny panel is fairly independent in the sense that it can, to a certain extent, choose to scrutinise anything, and I certainly think that it's important that, as the town deal programme progresses, there is that oversight. So I have no issue supporting that part. On the youth zone, which we've discussed a lot, and I've made my opinions very clear on it, it's something which I am very convinced by, but obviously the town deal, even had it been included, only gets us the capital funding, or part of the capital funding. For me, the huge challenge is the revenue costs per year, the money. There's no point in building it if we can't afford to run it and run it properly. Now, Councillor Willits raised the point about the match funding. Now, in the original financial model, I believe our contribution was sort of 400,000 to 500,000, somewhere in that region, with the rest coming in funders from elsewhere. What isn't quite clear is that, and it's a little bit like how the arts works, that if we haven't got support and financial support from the statutory body for providing youth services, which is the county council, it's not clear to me that we would actually get that full match funding. Therefore, we would have to accept that potentially we could be looking at far higher. You know, if that money doesn't come, the base cost of running it is £1.3 million a year. So our cost is a minimum of 500,000. It's a maximum of 1.3 million. Now, if we as a council, and by council I mean all 51 members, are minded to go ahead with that, I would expect complete political buy-in from all groups as to the very difficult decisions to make on the other side of the equation, because make no mistake, if we spend £1 million per year on it, we will not be spending £1 million a year on something else, because we have to run a balanced budget. So we have the budget workshops coming coming up later in this month. So I would expect and hope that everybody has got some ideas, if they really want to push forward with this, from all parties, turn up with those with some real hard, proper suggestions as to what they want to take out in order to be able to include this. So I think we are accepting the recommendation, the first part. I think we're making a small alteration to the second part. I think, I mean, it crosses over both Councillor Laws's portfolio and money. So it's also Councillor Lissimore. I don't know who wishes to, got some wording. I've got some, well, I've got some wording. Do you want me to do it? Okay. Well, my suggestion, if I find the right page on the moment, is to accept part A as it's worded, and to revise part B, that Cabinet includes investigation into funding of youth zone as part of ongoing budget setting process, and works with members and budget workshops to identify estimated 400,000 to 1.3 million annual revenue costs necessary, suitable site and capital funding, alongside the town deal allocation of funding for youth services provision, mindful of the legal requirement to deliver a balanced revenue budget. So, is that something Cabinet are minded to accept? Agreed? Okay, that is agreed. Thank you. Yeah, it's not 8 o'clock yet. We'll see where we get to around 8 o'clock and consider a break. My clock is right. We move on to item 10, which I don't believe we have. No, we have no public speakers on this, so I'll go straight to Councillor Lissimore.
Thank you. I will be very brief. It is as read, and look forward to any Cabinet contributions. Great deal of work has already been done on this through Essex County Council, as well as the clinical commissioning groups. So any comments gratefully received. Thank you.
I've had a good read of this. Any other Cabinet members have any comments to make on it? In which case we are asked to... Oh, Bev, sorry, my apologies, Bev, you're behind the camera there. Councillor Oxford.
I just wanted to say how nice it is that somebody's giving us money for a change, so the other way around.
I couldn't agree more. Now, we're just to be clear, we're considering the report. Do we require a vote on this? Yes, we do, to agree it. Are we all agreed? Agreed. I think we're all agreed. So that's that item. I think 10.2, no, we have no public speakers on that. Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Review Letter 2021, which is also Councillor Lissimore.
Again, I'd just like to add a thank you to all members of the public and officers. It's good that everyone has scrutiny. It is good that decisions are looked at. So again, thank you to members of the public who have in the past decided to ask questions over things that have happened within the council. Thank you to the officers who have to deal with that. I know Andrew Weaver's particularly, does a lot of work. And also thank you to the Ombudsman for their review. So as read. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anybody else wish to speak on this item? No. So Cabinet, do we agree and accept the annual review letter on the number of complaints received regarding Colchester Borough Council for 2021? All agreed. Thank you. And item 10.3, Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited, recommendation from Governance and Audit Committee. We have Councillor Willits to speak on this item. Councillor Willits.
Leader, can I present the recommendations on behalf of the Governance and Audit Committee, which I chair? Cabinet and Council have delegated to the Governance and Audit Committee the responsibility as the Council shareholder in CCHL, and we receive regular reports on the performance of the company and its operational entities. We seek assurance that CCHL is operating at peak performance with governance and risk management policies consistent with CBC's carefully developed raft of policies in this area. And of course, I point you to the fact that the dividend payable to the council of £250,000 last year is assured within the boundaries of acceptable risk. The 6-page report on the order paper shows the committee's methods and questioning to obtain this assurance, which we give to Cabinet. Only one issue arose out of this piece of scrutiny that requires Cabinet's opinion. Currently, CCHL operates as an execution-only contractor without any financial reserves. So CBC hands out the task and the cash, CCHL and its sub-entities delivers, and at the end of the day, on those particular activities, there is a balance sheet with zero on it. Thus, CCHL have no financial independence and not in a position to develop additional businesses, even if it would increase the dividend payable to CBC. Now, obviously, we have to be careful when we consider the option of providing them with balance sheet flexibility. Too much independence for an arm's length trading company can go dramatically wrong. You'll remember the reports a couple of years ago of the Community Heating and Energy Supply Scheme, which almost bankrupted Bristol City Council. And more recently, Luton Council virtually collapsed during COVID because it has an airport on its trading company assets. And similarly, the taxpayers of Manchester are sorely perplexed and smarting as to why they own Stansted, but have had negligible flight incomes for the last 18 months. So there is a note of caution, which I add. But there may be a happy medium where CCHL has balance sheet flexibility to a certain extent to investigate and move into additional trading activities, which could increase the dividend to CBC at an acceptable level of risk. The shareholder committee therefore asks Cabinet to commission CCHL to provide a report examining the best methods and balances to develop balance sheet strength, giving the opportunity to be more financially independent in a way that would enhance the dividend payable to the council, but within acceptable risks. So that is the recommendations that we have to Cabinet. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Willett. Yeah, certainly having read the agenda pack, I can see that there was an extensive debate at governance and audit, and it looks like it was quite a good one, actually, I think. Absolutely right that I suppose it's a bit of, if you like, a fundamental question for us as a council whenever we talk about our commercial companies, just how commercial we want them to be. And we always have to remember that with commercial activities, it's like the little small print on adverts with investments. If profit was guaranteed, it would be very easy, but there is always an element of risk attached to any commercial activity. So I will hand over to Councillor Lissimore, whose portfolio this comes in, I believe.
Thank you. I was obviously there at the meeting, very grateful to be allowed to speak. Obviously, there are concerns that CCHL do have the council's backing and answer to the council, but also to give them enough free rein to act independently as much as possible in the commercial world. So I think looking at that, the Cabinet have requested to commission to provide detailed reports examining the best method to develop balance sheet strength so that they can be more financially independent. I think that's what we need to discuss tonight. is what we need to agree on. So I'd be grateful for comments from other members of the Cabinet on those issues from the committee. Thank you.
Well, other members of the Cabinet, you have your invitation. Who would like to speak on this item? Councillor Ellis.
I haven't got a lot to say on it, if I'm honest, Chairman, other than to say I think it's a jolly good idea to commission them to do it. They have been operating for a reasonable length of time now, very successfully actually, for this authority. I think the idea of setting them free to do a little bit more is a good thing, but I think there need to be some checks and balances within that. This is purely giving them an opportunity to explain to us or work up a business case effectively for us and how they would do that, as far as I read it. And I can't see that there are any risks involved with us doing that and making that decision this evening. I think we should give them the opportunity to do that, and I look forward to reading the report which comes to us subsequent to them doing that piece of work. So I'm very happy to support and agree with this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. I mean, my feeling is, not, I have seen sort of alternative suggested wording go around on that. And this is just my personal view, others may vehemently disagree with me, sometimes they do, that when dealing with our commercial companies, I think it is a very fundamental thing to what the council is as a body. And I think whenever we are doing anything, we need to have generally good wide support from all members, because we are, it is the council's, what it does, its activities. So what's come out of the Governance and Audit Committee, as I understand it, had support cross-party, and from all groups, or all groups represented on Governance and Audit. So my concern is if we, as a cabinet, just 6 of us, then start altering it, we then lose that widespread support for what we're doing from across group. That's just my feeling. So I'm reluctant to start. This is my personal view. I'm reluctant to start changing it and then lose that cross-party support. But others may disagree with me if anybody wishes to comment. Councillor Lissimore.
I would just say, yes, I agree with that. I think we have enough confidence in the committee to know that they will look at both the short-term and the long-term plans. So I have every confidence in them. I would do my best, obviously, to attend and speak when I am requested to. So I agree with your assumptions on this.
Okay, just to clarify, Councillor, I believe it was a unanimous recommendation by the committee, was it?
Certainly, Leader, yes, it was.
Yeah, because that obviously gives it that wider backing, which I think is important to have when we're talking about things like this. So, my feeling is we accept the recommendation. So is that something Cabinet members agree with? And we have no dissenters, so that is agreed. I'm minded that it's 8 o'clock. Would we just like a very short break, maybe 5 minutes? Or would you prefer to keep going? I'm seeing no responses either way. Well, I will take that as we'll keep going. We'll keep going while we've got the good behind us. Right, so item 11 is policy panel recommendations, which we have 3 speakers on this. And the first speaker is Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy.
Okay, thank you very much, Cabinet, for inviting me to speak this evening. I'm here to speak to you as chair of the policy panel, not only seeking approval for the recommendations put forward to you tonight, but to seek a mutual agreement on the terms of reference. The policy panel is one of the few committees at this Borough Council that has great cooperation amongst all parties for the greater good of this borough. Enabling councillors to bring ideas to the table that Cabinet would not have time to address on its own and do not fall into the remit of other committees, this policy panel has, over a number of years, debated on a number of important issues. From the early days of the youth zone for our young people in Colchester to the grounds maintenance contract, from heritage signs to universal credit. I understand that there may be some confusion amongst this Cabinet on how the panel has worked in previous years. Essentially, the panel and public would bring ideas to the table in two separate items before that meeting, substantive items. Proposals would be debated, and if we believed it would be useful to the borough and its residents to discuss further, we would request approval from Cabinet. It was not and should not be there solely to rubber stamp Cabinet ideas or to be drip fed work that Cabinet perhaps feels is not important enough to deal with themselves. That seems somewhat undemocratic and a waste of time for the officers and the panel members. No panel should solely be at the mercy of Cabinet. Instead, it should work alongside Cabinet and seek Cabinet's approval for policies that can change this great borough for the better. If anything, we're here to assist you, to advise and to promote, not to be the lapdog. I fully understand that Cabinet or full council will make that final decision. The leader was kind enough to attend the first meeting back at the Moot Hall in June. Here he acknowledged the importance of panel participation and acknowledged the need for panel members to be able to bring their own initiatives to the table. Of course, I appreciate that the leader cannot make these decisions on his own. However, we were of the opinion that a discussion would be had with his Cabinet colleagues, and I hope that this has been had and would be keen to understand the outcome. And if it hasn't been had, why not? And hopefully we can have it here tonight. I hereby ask that you please, as a Cabinet, agree to a third term of reference, as it was in 2020, for the panel to proactively identify issues and legislative changes that may require review and improvement, and to seek Cabinet's agreement as to whether and how they should be examined. Now, to the proposed work programme to be discussed in this evening's item. 3 items that we have identified are seeking your approval. Should you choose not to accept this third term of reference, then of course you will flatly refuse these 3 proposed items on the work programme. Should you choose to refuse them, I'm interested to hear your views on the identified issues and your reasons to why you would turn it down. Will they be addressed elsewhere? Note that one of the proposals brought forward for approval tonight has been brought forward to the panel initially by a senior officer. If Cabinet approves the work programme in its entirety, I know that all members of the panel cross-party will be grateful with this decision. We'll be grateful that the work programme, we will be debating the work programme further and will send recommendations back to you for approval. This, if you do agree tonight, by proxy agrees a third term of reference. To conclude, I would say that there has never been a case where debated policies have taken up too much time, have dragged on, or been a waste of time. If the road leads nowhere, the debate will reach that conclusion. Recommendations arising from these discussions to the Cabinet can of course be turned down, but I believe it to be unwise not to let the discussion be had on a panel designed for such things. There is a talented pool of cross-party colleagues who are most unhappy not to be using the panel to its full potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. I mean, we've had this debate actually at the policy panel. The terms of reference have been changed very, very mildly. I think there was a misunderstanding perhaps in the past exactly what its terms of reference were. But what I would say is that in terms of working in a cooperative way between Cabinet and the policy panel, I think we perhaps do need to have better lines of communication. And I am very happy to take that on board and ensure that perhaps we do have some more regular communication to ensure that actually Cabinet and policy panel are working in harmony together rather than against one another, because if we work against each other, we will achieve nothing. So, but I you know, the changes made were very minor and nobody raised them when they were put towards full council back in May. But thank you for your comments and we'll certainly take them on board.
Thank you.
The next speaker, now I'm going to have to, it's Councillor Goetsch. First, I need to ask a question. Do I pronounce your name right? Is it Goetsch or Goucher? Because I've heard people pronounce it different ways, and I just want to get it right once and for all.
Thank you, Leader. It is Goetsch, so you are pronouncing it correctly. Thank you. I'm just here to express my agreement with Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Pearson in terms of the recommended the work programme of the policy panel. I do share Councillor McCarthy's concerns that there is a danger that the policy panel just picks up the table scraps of the cabinet. I do feel that it's important to use the policy panel fully to discuss matters of substance. And you know, I welcome the reassurance that you've just given. I do agree with you that we need to be working in conjunction with the cabinet rather than, you know, in hostility. So I would fully agree with that. I do believe that ask that the work programme recommended to cabinet here be adopted. I know that there's been some debate about item A, the planning policies matter, you know, to reiterate some of the comments made earlier, a climate emergency was declared 2 years ago, and it was incredibly frustrating in one of the planning committee meetings, particularly about the flats issue near Corston Road, where you know, the issue of guiding development towards sustainable solutions couldn't really be discussed because Colchester Council doesn't have a policy. 2 years after the climate emergency was declared. I mean, that is just not good enough. And you know, whether it is debated in the local plan committee or whether it's the policy panel, is not the key issue. The key issue is that something gets done. And my concern is if it goes to the local plan committee or whatever, and it is kicked in the long grass for another 2 years. It needs to be sorted out. And I would just welcome any comments that show a determination to get something done there. With regard to some of the other issues on the work programme, I completely agree with Councillor Young, the Deputy Mayor's concerns about universal credit's impact, and discussing what we as a council can do about that, I think is really important. And I would hope that Councillor Young will share his insights and knowledge with all members of the policy panel if he's listening to this part at home. And issues like the river strategy and litter are some things that are very, very much concern our residents in all our wards. I know that Councillor Pearl has done a lot of work on the river issue. So it would be great that the policy panel can discuss this, but working in conjunction with Councillor Crowe and Councillor Crow's insights can become part of the discussion. I do urge you to approve these added items to the policy panel's work programme so that we can discuss these matters of substance. Thank you.
We have one more speaker. We have Councillor Corey, I think, if I find the right correct. We do indeed. Councillor Corey, you are still there. The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Good evening once again. Good evening all town. I'm getting done. Please, you can hear me okay. I'm here to support the chair of the policy, Councillor McCarthy, earlier, and I'm glad that we've made some more work. I want to understand cross-party policy panel believes stages of minor are nurturing the process, having democratic policy ideas really want. And when I set up the policy panel with the initiatives of the public part originally about 3 years ago, we all felt that it was a really positive step. We got lots of good ideas. We then had some changes to that because cross-party comments were that we needed to streamline it a bit further. I understand, having been a previous leader with a cabinet, that you can have conflicting policies between cabinet, between councillors and public, and you have to find a middle way, and we often did that. I call upon you, really, Leader, to understand that these minor changes have been discussed in the terms of reference, have been discussed by the policy panel, and they feel that actually that does go too far to mean that they can only discuss things that have been agreed by Cabinet. I would actually suggest that those minor changes are looked at again by this Cabinet, and to understand whether or not that does in the way that the chairman has outlined, and cross-party comments have been made at the policy panel that they are concerned about that. So I would take your warm words and see if we can turn it into action to reverse those minor changes to make sure the panel do feel exercised to put forward policy that isn't just rubber stamped by Cabinet. I challenge you that it is better to have that diversity of thought and not just Cabinet ideas or Cabinet rubber stamped programmes of work. And I hope you support the programme that they've put forward this evening. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Corey. I mean, I think, as I said to Councillor McCarthy, I think I would agree that we need to perhaps ensure that we're working in a more collaborative way and there is more communication. And I think that that will solve, I will not say they're issues, but I think it will have a positive effect. I'm not minded to change the terms of reference, I think, but I do think we need to ensure that we're working effectively together. On the work programme, we'll discuss it in a moment. I think we're fairly positive on it, but I do think in terms of the conflict with other committees, I am concerned about the planning one, but equally I take on board Councillor Goetsch's comments about that we need to ensure that local plan, if that's where it is going to be discussed, are actively doing something. So perhaps Councillor Ellis, I don't know if, would you agree with that? It's your portfolio.
Well, I would agree with that, and I can assure Councillor Goetsch that the local plan committee will deal with it, and I'm not going to apologise for it not being dealt with yet, because we've only just become the administration. So there's been, as you say, there's been everyone saying 2 years, nothing's been done, but we weren't actually in charge. But let's park that for a minute and say we will actually do something now. So I will have a discussion with Karen and make sure. I know she's already working on this, and it is something that she's intending to bring forward. So let's do that, and there are plenty of people on all sides who would like to see that done, so that's a piece of work that can be done. As far as that, so I would strike that from the work programme, because I think that's the right and proper place for it to be, is, as I'm sure they've already been told by the monitoring officer, is with the local plan committee. That's where it sits. And I'd just like to say, personally, I love the idea of working up a river policy. It's something that I've lived here all my life. I've loved the river. I started fishing on the river at the bottom of Castle Park when I was about 2 or 3 years old. I can still remember the fishing rod that was bought from Woolworths. It was like a tank aerial, but it worked a treat. It's a tremendous asset, the river, and it's an underutilised asset, in my opinion. So the idea of working up a policy for our river is a really, really good one. So I'd love to see that. And I know it's something that's very close to Councillor Jow's heart, and I think he'll be heavily involved with that. So I would give my support for that, and the other things on the work programme. But I just have an issue with that one, Chairman. I'd like to see that struck out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's probably my feelings. You know, I do feel that we have to take the advice from a monitoring officer quite seriously as to that things are ending up in the right committee. We are bound by the rules of the council, and he's the man who knows them. So we do have to take that on board. So I'm minded to say yes, we agree to the programme as suggested, with the removal of the planning one. I was also perhaps, depending on particularly what, sorry, Councillor Crowe, I missed you there. Councillor Crowe.
So I wasn't trying to butt in, just make myself known. I would welcome any positive conversation about the river. If Councillor Goss is still watching, I'm sure he'd be interested to know I do actually live very close to it, and my last 2 homes were actually next to it. So it's something I'm particularly concerned about. There's something relaxing about living by water, though. It's really rather special. And I do hope that the algae problem can be part of that conversation with the policy panel. And the other aspect to that is we're all now supposedly living more active, healthier lifestyles. So should the river be a part of that? And should we be looking at river access, making access to the river easier? I know a couple of years ago, Councillor Laws and I were both very disappointed that we proposed that the S106 money from a development down at East Bay, some of that money be put towards river access on the tidal side of the river for the canoeists who came down the river so they could get out of the river and then get back in it again, and that didn't happen. And I'd like to ensure that for future generations, and maybe for what's left of our generations, that there is more to come with the river and that we can enjoy it. And I too used to fish there, just outside the Castle Park gates, and I spent the night before Charles and Di's wedding back in 1981 night fishing just by the gates there, and it probably was the last time I ever went night fishing, but it's a shared experience there. So yes, I do support a conversation about the river.
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. My apologies for not seeing you there. One other thing which has been suggested, and I don't know how Cabinet members feel about it, is that we spoke earlier, I think Councillor Goss raised it, about the grounds maintenance contract and looking forward to the next 2 years, what we might want to do with it. Whether that is a topic, perhaps the policy panel, as it's a fairly long-term decision, might want to look at. I don't know how people are minded. But what I would suggest, and I'm happy to make it part of the Cabinet decision, is that if we task democratic services to actually making sure that in future we have some regular meetings, informal meetings, between the chair of the policy panel and either myself or the relevant portfolio holder, so we actually have a proper discussion and actually work better together. And I'm quite happy to make that part of the actual recommendation, because I think the message is that's probably the way we need to work. Okay, so Cabinet, I think we need to take a decision on this. My feeling is that we approve it with the deletion of the planning and with the potential addition, subject to discussions with the chair, of the examining the future of the grounds maintenance contract. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. That is agreed. I think we have I'm assuming that we'd like to press on. I guess so. And that is actually the end of the public section. I just need to read out a brief announcement. He says, looking for the right piece of paper. And I need to move the following motion. I move that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, and in accordance with the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information brackets England Regulations 2012, the public, including members of the press, be excluded from the meeting for the following items as they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. Before the public feed ends, I'd just like to thank everybody for attending. Thank you for everybody listening, and good night. So can we stop the recording, please?